What's up guys, Ben Melican here for Mystery Tackle Box. If you watch any videos over on my channel, you know that I am absolutely obsessed with Squarebill Crankbaits, and the reason for that is very, very simple. They catch a ton of fish from the very, very start of the season when the water's in the low 40s, all the way through the season, all summer, all fall, and once again, back down when the water gets in the 40s. They are fish catching machines in shallow water. So in today's video, I'm going to go over two separate types of Squarebill crankbaits, your typical 1.5 size Squarebill crankbait and a flat side Squarebill crankbait, and give you guys some tips to help you catch more fish this spring. So the first bait we'll talk about is the first bait that I pull out of my box in the spring when the water is still super, super cold, and I'll use it all the way until the spawn when the water gets up into the high 50s and into the 60s, and that is the flat-sided Squarebill. This one right here is a 6 cents flat 75 Squarebill, and it's probably my favorite crankbait of all time to throw. Now the reason I pull this guy out when the water's really, really cold is because it has a nice natural shimmy action, which is absolutely perfect because those fish are lethargic. They're not wanting to move around a whole bunch, so that really nice tight action of a flat-sided bait, the same way a lipless crankbait gets bit, this dude is absolutely killer. Now when the water gets up into the mid to upper 50s and those fish are really moving around a whole bunch, they're feeding up, they're getting ready to go spawn up in that shallow water, and you really want to cover some water, fish a ton of different types of cover, that's when I'll pull out this 1.5 size Boyd Duckett series Squarebill. This guy right here has a little bit wider action wobble, so you can fish in a little bit warmer water. The fish, aren't so lethargic anymore, that you don't have to have that really tight shimmy, and that's when this guy really, really shines. So places I like to throw this bait are anywhere a little bit shallower than that flat side Squarebill. The flat side dives 5, 6, 7 feet. This guy dives 2 to 3 feet, and so any type of hard cover in that depth range, you want to bounce this guy off as much as possible. So although that 1.5 series crankbait and this flat-sided crankbait here from 6 Cents Lures are two totally different types of baits that I use in different situations, one thing remains the same with both baits, and that is you always want to deflect a Squarebill crankbait off whatever cover you're fishing in front of you. You might pick up a random fish here and there, just casting it out and reeling it in into open water, whatever. The absolute deal with shallow running, especially Squarebill crankbaits, is to hit them off of whatever you're fishing. Now, since I fish this flat-sided crankbait, this 6 cents flat 75 in colder water, I'm almost always looking for deeper rock on the bank to fish this bait, and that's what we have right up here. I'm going to cast this bait out and retrieve it parallel to that rock and try to make contact with as many different rocks down there as possible. That deflection factor of that nice tight shimmying bait gets you so many bites when that water is in the 40s. I've caught fish all the way into the upper 30s on this flat-sided crankbait. It really is an awesome, awesome fish catcher whenever you're fishing that colder water. Now, one more tip I can give you for fishing the flat-sided crankbait is a lot of times those fish are really, really cold. They don't want to move a whole lot. They don't want to chase a bait a whole bunch when the water is really, really cold when I like to throw this bait. So I'll oftentimes just give it a nice long sweep and let it sit there for just a second. Kind of like a jerk bait. You're letting it pause right there, letting it sit in their face a little bit more. And this bait right here is actually, it's not very buoyant. So it rises super, super slow. It gives it a chance to sit down there in the strike zone while it's sitting there in those fish's faces. I mean, those big pre-spawn females that are up there warming those eggs up, rubbing on that super nasty, chunky rock. This probably is my favorite all-time bait to catch them with. It catches the big ones. Another really, really big key whenever you're fishing a Squarebill crankbait is angles. Like I just talked about with the flat side crankbait, you want to make sure you're parallel to that riprap and rock. That's no different with the regular Squarebill crankbait. I see too many guys, they'll come up to a laydown or a dock, they'll make one cast right next to the dock, they'll pull it down they'll reel it in quick, and then they'll fire onto the next dock. Well, if you would have made your way in and kind of got parallel, maybe it's a riprap bank in between the two docks, and fished, even if it's only a 15 or 20 foot section of riprap, that's oftentimes the juice. That's where the big ones like to lay because they're not getting fished for in there. Same deal if you pull up to a laydown or something like that. Make multiple presentations to different parts of that tree, different parts of the stump, the dock, whatever it may be, and it'll just take a lot different presentation to... Sometimes it'll take a little bit different presentation to trigger those bigger female bass. The tackle I like to use for both these different types of crankbaits is identical. I really like to throw them on a 7-foot or 7.3 medium heavy action, moderate taper graphite crankbait rod. Now that was a big mouthful and might be hard to understand, but basically you want the sensitivity of graphite whenever you're bouncing into anything, you know you're making contact, for when a fish just comes up behind it, takes in and throws a bunch of slack in your line, you're gonna know that was a bite. A lot of times I feel like with fiberglass you don't feel those bites, so I really like a graphite rod, but you want that slower, moderate action because you want them to inhale that crankbait. You don't want to pull those little treble hooks away from them. And I'm always throwing them on a 6:3 gear ratio reel. You know, it's not too fast, not too slow, right there in the middle. If you need to take up a bunch of slack or get bit on the end of a long cast, you can get good hooks in them. And I beef up the line for this a little bit. I always throw it on fluorocarbon line, but if I'm throwing the flat side, I want to get it deeper. I will go down to 12 pounds sometimes, but other than that, it's almost always 15 or 17 pound fluorocarbon line, depending on how heavy cover you're fishing. Well, that's all I got for this one today, guys. Remember, when you're fishing the water at the very start of the year or the end of the year when it's really cold, below 50 degrees, go with this flat-sided crankbait. When it warms up a little bit, you're fishing a lot more shallow cover, different types of wood, dock, stuff like that. Check out this 1.5 series crankbait, and please just run this into things. Run these two into shallow cover, and I can about guarantee you're gonna catch some giant launches. Thanks for watching, guys.